Hi, I know you're ready to see this week's episode of Director's Cut. Thanks for tuning in. First, a quick message from us. It's the end of the year. For a lot of people, that means holiday preparation and celebration. It also means that it's time to make those final charitable contributions to get them on your 2020 tax return. We'd like to ask this year that you consider the Geo-Institute when you make those contributions. Your gift to GI goes to our Student Participation Fund, 100% of it. We don't pay salaries, overhead, or anything else out of your donation. It pays for the student competitions, travel grants, supports grad student chapters, and a lot more. As I hope you've noticed, it's our 25th anniversary this year. We are fortunate to have GI past President Ed Cavazangian contribute a matching gift of $125,000 to the Student Participation Fund this summer. Matching gift means that we need others' contributions in order to make it happen. As of December 8th, we're about 15% of the way to our goal, so we have a long way to go. We have some great thank you gifts for your donations. For $25 or more, you'll receive the limited edition 25th anniversary GI pin. It's the only way you're going to be able to get one of these. For $250 or more, you'll receive a pin and a limited edition GI golf shirt. Same thing, only available with your contribution. For $2,500 and more, you'll receive both the pin and the shirt, and also recognition as part of the President's Circle and 4 issues of GEOSTRATA in 2021. We have corporate giving options as well, so be sure to check those out. To make your gift, visit geo-institute.org and click Student Participation Fund. Remember the 3 100s. 100% of your gift goes to student programs, 100% is tax deductible, and 100% will be matched until we hit that $125,000 plateau. Thanks for your generosity. Have a very happy holidays and a great start to 2021. Now on to the show.
The bells, the bows, and the flashing lights, the mistletoes and the silent nights. It's all for show and it's alright. That's not why I love this.
Hi everybody, welcome again to Director's Cut, the show where I, Brad Keelor, the director of the Geo-Institute, interview GI members about their lives, their professional lives, their personal lives. We make sure all the questions are fun. We keep it moving. Every single week there's a new one of these interviews. If you like what you have seen already, and if you like what you're about to see, click on the little button that says subscribe outside of the window that you're watching this in, and then click on the little one that says get notifications, and you will be notified every time we post a new video to our channel, which is frequently. Today, our guest is Mary Nodine. You may know her in name as the Geo-Poet. She's been writing a poem in GeoStrata for how many years?
Since 2008. So
that's a lot of
12
years. 12 years. She has a day job, too, that she'll be telling you a little bit about in a minute. And she is in a third role for us, too. You may recognize her as the interviewer from GeoStrata Extra, the hit series that you can also find on the GI YouTube channel. So check those out when you're done here.
In one of them, I'm wearing a Halloween costume, so...
And that's an excellent one. I'm also wearing a Halloween costume in that one. So thanks for joining us today, Mary. And as you can see, it is the holiday season. Yes. So thanks for making time. We will start today, the first question, the same way we start with everybody else. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
All right, I'll do my best. I work for GEI Consultants out of Boston, Massachusetts. I've worked for them almost all of my career. I'm really a jack of all trades. Primarily, I do ground improvement design, excavation support design, and I also dabble in slope stability and instrumentation. Soft soils are sort of my favorite thing. I have more recently gotten involved in working with the FHWA in their A-Game program. So that's promoting advanced geotechnical methods to state DOTs. And I'm doing a project with them and some extracurricular work with them as well. And on the side, but I guess it qualifies as part of my career, I'm the chair of the Subsurface Characterization Committee for the Deep Foundations Institute. So I do a lot of work with DFI as well.
Excellent. We will go right into the fun questions after that. What is the first thing you usually think when you wake up in the morning?
Okay, so I think the first thing that crosses my mind is whether I actually got a full night of sleep because my kids woke me up or not. And mourning or celebrating, whichever is the answer. And then I'm probably trying to tear myself out of bed so I can try to either do some yoga or go for a run or possibly get some work done before they get up.
Those are very worrying, heavy thoughts. Do you ever have like a fun thought when you wake up in the morning?
If it's Saturday.
and that's it.
This is COVID life, right?
I feel like this took a sad turn really early on.
I'm sorry.
You've been the geo-poet for the last dozen years. What inspired you to do that? What poet or musician has provided you the most inspiration throughout your career? Not necessarily just for the geo-poet role, but all along.
So I've been a poet. The first time I remember writing a poem was in middle school. And when I used to do that, I think probably Dr. Seuss was my biggest inspiration. And I tended to write a lot of very rhymey, whimsical Dr. Seuss type poems. And that has definitely carried into a lot of the GEOSTRATA ones. So I thought I wanted to be a poet. My dad really pushed me into math, science, engineering. So it's probably a lot more lucrative. And I don't know if it's more or less stressful. Based on being the geo-poet, it might actually be more stressful as a poet. So I don't really know. But these days, I think my favorite poet as an adult is Mary Oliver. She writes really beautiful poems about nature. And I try to do a lot of listening and reading poetry. Now I feel that I used to try to interpret it in a very heavy, literal way. And now I've been trying to increase my volume of poetry consumption, which is really actually helpful with the geo-poems because it kind of introduces me to different structures and ways of writing poems and not just following the same formula all the time. So yeah, Mary Oliver and Dr. Seuss.
Excellent. How far in advance do you write the geo-poems? Do you have a stack of 150 behind you somewhere and you just email them off when you get asked for one? Or is there more pressure than that?
I wish. So the poems, I usually have to submit them maybe 4 months before anyone actually sees them published, but I am always working against the deadline. And I would say very often an impending poem is more stressful than a work deadline which makes it sound like not very much fun because they are fun. And once I get started on one, it's really fun. But coming up with the idea, creativity on a deadline is really not an easy thing to do. And that's why I think I'm glad that poetry is not my actual job. Because A, I probably wouldn't be able to I wouldn't make very much money, and B, I would be feeling pressure all the time to be creative. It's also probably hard around an engineering job and parenting. But once I have an idea and kind of a structure in place, then I can kind of sit down and do it, and it's kind of fun. The other interesting thing regarding poetry and COVID is that I used to write almost all my poems on airplanes. So I was really I would just find that it was this place where nothing was going to distract me. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go get a snack. I'm just no procrastination, just sit there on the airplane and focus on the poem. There was something about that. It was okay, if I had a work trip, I knew I could bang out a poem. And no more airplanes.
But the poems are still fun.
I mean, they are. I've been reusing some older ones, but I am really struggling to find the time to sit down and brainstorm them these days. So it's a struggle. I get so much appreciation from readers about them, and that is really what keeps me going. People will email me and say that they appreciated them, and that makes me really happy that people are reading them. So I'll keep doing it. It would be nice to have some more help, but I just don't think that that's the reality.
It's kind of a niche. It's a niche field.
It really is.
So thinking about your day job now that cuts into your time of being a poet, is there a specific project that you hated working on at the time that now you look back on fondly? Maybe there's even one that's been the subject of a poem.
All the good ones are subjects of poems. But so I guess I have two. I mean, there's a group I used to do a lot of really remote drilling jobs when I worked in Colorado for a couple of years for GEI, and I did a lot of really remote drilling jobs on dams. And I think at the time it was hard, like living in kind of low end hotels and being in the middle of nowhere and drilling on these dams. But then I look back on them and I'll see the pictures and I'll be like, that was actually a really beautiful spot and a cool experience. I also, in maybe 2012, my first real experience with project management was a project called Epic Deep Space for the medical software company Epic, and we did this massive underground auditorium for them, and I was in charge of designing the retaining walls for it. And that was just one of those projects that at the time it was like I was thrown into the fire. I felt like a ringleader of a circus, like managing the drafters and the contractors, and everything was changing all the time. And then, of course, at the end of it, it was really amazing, and I was so proud of what we built. But at the time, it was definitely pretty miserable.
So that's a lot of time in remote areas, and I didn't intend to have such a direct segue to this. Your favorite city to visit that you would never want to live in. I guess it doesn't have to be a big city, but...
Well, I'm not a very exotic traveler, so my answer to that is going to be Austin, Texas. And the reason is because I went to graduate school there, and I loved it so much, and my time there was really special and awesome, and I would definitely go back and visit. But I knew from the first week I was there that I could never live there permanently because it's so hot. The weather, I just had a really hard time with that, being from New England. I know you're a runner, and I remember distinctly going running in an ice storm there. And there was nobody else on the street, nobody. And the homeless people were looking at me like, what is this girl doing? But I was like, woohoo, some cold weather. This is great.
But did the heat scare you away from running? I guess we'll get to that in a minute. But what's your upper bound on running for temperature?
I would do it at 6 a.m, and you'd walk out the door and it would feel like maybe sort of okay because it was 75 degrees. But then the second you would start moving, you'd just be dripping because it was so humid. So I was stubborn, and I still did run a lot, but I definitely didn't enjoy it as much because I like the cool, crisp weather. Cool to cold is my preference.
You get used to it both ways. There was one day this summer when I went out, and I looked at WeatherBug, and the heat index was 108, and I think I did 4 miles, and I probably looked like I was going to die when I got home, but I kind of like the hot weather to run in sometimes.
I don't know. I didn't get used to it. I was there for 2 years and I was done.
So you mentioned off the top your involvement with DFI, which was a nice little plug for those guys. How did you get involved with ASCE and GI originally?
So ASCE and GI, I was really the poetry. So the first poem that I submitted to GeoStrata was called Blue Clay Blues, and I was living in Arkansas for a year and was feeling really nostalgic for Boston and my engineering friends there and all my fieldwork experience there. And I wrote a poem that kind of waxed philosophical on Boston blue clay and its homogeneity. And so I used to write poems a lot before I did the GeoStrata poems. I would just write little joking poems among my engineering friends, and other people would write poems, and it was just kind of a thing. And then that Blue Clay Blues one, my dad read it and was like, a lot of people might like this. You should submit it to a journal or something. And I was like, I'm not going to submit it to a journal. And then I just on a whim sent it to Jim Withiam at GeoStrata. And he said, this is great, I'm going to publish it. And then the next issue that came along 2 months later, he was like, can you send us another one? Wow. And so then I just kind of kept going. So, I was involved with ASCE on sort of a local level, not really that seriously before that. But then the GeoStrata thing was what really got me engaged. And then I eventually, because of my involvement with GeoStrata, I became an editor when they had an opening, and I've just been involved from that angle for a long time.
Oh, fantastic. That's good. I had no idea that it was that directly related to the poetry. Now we're going to talk about running again.
Okay.
Not that this whole show is going to be about running, but
Running is great.
so you ran for real in college. I guess you could talk a little bit about that too. As what I'm interested in, has there ever been a time, running is an addiction for a lot of people, I think. Has there ever been a time where you thought about not doing it? And how'd you overcome that and keep on going?
Okay, so I ran in college. I ran the steeplechase. Do you know what the steeplechase is?
I do. You might have to explain it for the people out in
Steeplechase.
TV land, though.
People know it from horses, but the steeplechase is a long distance race that you jump over hurdles and run through a puddle. So just random side note is that the steeplechase was my far and away favorite college event. I did cross country. I was not so into the cross country thing. And I ran marathons for a while. And like when I was in Austin, for example, training for a marathon in Austin, which was not so much fun for me. But yeah, I don't run that much anymore. And I think at some point, I've never considered not running. At some point, I got to a place where I'd had so many injuries and realized that I couldn't, if I was going to keep running, I needed to not run so much. And it took me a long time to come to peace with that. So now I'm in a place where I can kind of run when I want to and not feel like, it's like I stay in shape so that I can run. I don't run so that I can stay in shape. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's where I'm at. I hope to run until I'm really old, but I am not somebody who sees running as like the end all be all of what I do.
But you've got a lot of miles under you. What is the craziest thing you ever saw when you've been out on the trails, whether it was a wild animal or someone you did not expect to encounter? What is your wildest running experience?
I can't think of anything that crazy. When I lived in Arkansas, I would see armadillos.
Oh,
that was weird.
That's pretty crazy.
They'd just be kind of lumbering along the trail. Yeah, that was cool.
But they're not threatening at all?
Oh no, they're scared of you.
Wow.
They smell weird too. But yeah, I definitely saw live armadillos on the trails in Arkansas. That's
pretty fun.
Not something you see in Massachusetts.
Well, unless I guess there could be a zoo escape situation, but that would be about the only way it would happen.
Yeah.
We haven't had any good technical questions. I feel a little sad about that. I perused your LinkedIn before we did this, and I saw the phrase submarine landslides. You have to talk a little bit about your work in submarine landslides, no matter how long ago it was.
Okay, so submarine landslides was what I did for my master's thesis, and I studied submarine slope failures or landslides, which are triggered by hurricane waves. So basically, as the hurricane wave builds up pressure, because it's so tall, it increases the pressure on the bottom of the ocean, and the bottom of the ocean is sitting at some marginally stable yet also very flat angle, but that little increase in pressure from the wave going up will cause a slope failure. And obviously the issue with that in the Gulf of Mexico, where I was doing my research, is that the oil pipelines and platforms can get broken. Right. So that's what I studied. I had a whole slope stability model predicting submarine landslides, and that was fun, but it's not been much of a part of my career since grad school.
Did you have a favorite landslide or a favorite hurricane that caused a landslide? Didn't expect to get that one.
No. Well, what was interesting was that Hurricane Katrina happened while I was in grad school. So that was kind of very real-time data that I got to collect right after the fact. So I guess I could say that answer.
So you had a lot then if you were there, because Wilma and Charlie, I guess all those storms went through the Gulf during that time.
Yeah, Hurricane Ivan was the one that didn't have too much of an, well, I might say this and then somebody's going to call me out on it. It wasn't one that was as touted for its impacts on land, but in the water, it really had a large impact because the periods of the waves were very long, oddly. But Ivan and Katrina and then Andrew, which was, I think, in the 90s, those were the ones that mean, I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time, but those were the ones that had the biggest impacts on the mudslides.
Well, we really like to put people to the test on Director's Cut and ask the hard questions.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I haven't asked anybody about yet is parenting. And I am curious, for all the parents out there who are engineers, or all the parents who are just watching this, has parenting had more of an impact on your professional life, or has your professional life had more of an impact on your parenting?
Okay, I'll answer your question. First of all, the feminist side of me is going to say, make sure you ask this to the men too. But, okay, you told me about this question and I tried to think of a good answer. I was a professional engineer before I was a parent. So you would think that, as a parent, I have always been a professional. And so that's the only parenting that I have under my belt. But when it really gets down to it, I think I definitely struggle with not putting my career first always, because it's very easy to feel like the obligations at work are the primary obligations, and the family, kind of take the family thing for granted. And so that's something I'm sort of struggling with every day. In terms of parenting having an impact on my work, I think it's had an impact on my stress levels with work, probably performance. And I think in some ways it's good for, it kind of teaches you time management when you have to leave the office at a certain time and stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, and professional impact on my parenting, I don't think I would really be sane if I didn't have my job. So in that way, it's good. But at the same time, I think I probably, as many people do, need to work on not letting the work demands seep into my family life as much as I do. But it is what it is.
And of course, this year the balance has been
this year
6,000 to 8,000 times harder.
Exactly. I mean, that's why I was also going to say that, is that in COVID times it's very different because there's much less boundary between work and family, and it's been an interesting year for sure.
What impact has that had on you for your work? I mean, for me, I feel like there's absolutely no boundary anymore. There are some days where I feel like I'm just on 24 hours a day. Anything different from that for you, or is it kind of the same thing?
I mean, I don't have the hard boundaries of bringing kids to daycare, going to the office, picking kids up from daycare. I think it's been beneficial in many ways to have that flexibility. I also have realized how forgiving people really are, both in my company and in the client world. Like, it's been really nice to kind of see the real side of people and be able to be more comfortable being like, yep, there's kids in the background and it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, like many people also, I think I've had to work on kind of drawing a line at night and not just continuing to pick up work and having it just always be there. So it's not an easy thing to do.
We have to finish with a fun question. That's the way this goes. You've spent a lot of time in your life in New England. What stereotype of Massachusetts or New England do you dislike the most?
I like the stereotypes of Massachusetts and New England. And like I told you, I lived in Texas, and I had a very dear friend who I used to drive around with a lot in Austin. And I would just always be telling her, like, why are you not honking at that person? Like, you're at a red light and they're not moving. I'm going to lean over and take your horn. But I feel I am a New Englander, and I tend to have a very direct and efficient communication style. And I find that to be a positive trait in other people because I don't like to beat around the bush. So I think there's sort of a stereotype that New England people aren't as polite. And that might be true, but I don't think it means that they're not nice. I just think that that's an impression that people have because of their communication style.
It's very different. I've had experiences up in that land where you'll be the only person walking down the sidewalk, and one person will come the other way, and you will look them in the eye and say hello, and they'll just kind of... and it terrifies me. And also now I want to figure out where the honk line is, and I want to map it. I think it's got to be somewhere between Baltimore and Philadelphia, because this
The line where you don't honk anymore?
Yeah, no one. We live in Virginia, and not a lot of honking happens here. But if we go to my in-laws in Jersey, it's like the light turns green, and if you don't go, somebody's laying on the horn behind you.
I remember learning, and I would probably never be able to find this, but I remember learning of a study where they sat in front of people in every state and figured out how long it would take them to honk, and Massachusetts was the fastest.
I'm going to go find that.
And in Texas, they just never honked.
Well, see, it's a lot of effort. I mean, I get
But
that.
then they're sitting in their car swearing to themselves instead of just letting their feelings out.
You don't want to offend them. Well, that was it. You made it through all the questions and the bonus ones. You survived. Everybody has survived so far, which is good. I'd probably have to stop the show if somebody didn't. Again, if you liked what you saw today, click on that subscribe button, click get notifications. You can watch all of our other wonderful videos on the GI YouTube channel, including GeoStrata Extra, which we'll be back with in January in the new year. And Mary will be hosting many of those and providing the deep, insightful questions that get asked to the authors. So thanks again, Mary.
Thank you for having me, Brad.
And everybody have a great holidays. We'll have one more director's cut before the holiday break. You'll be on pins and needles until then. Thanks. See you soon.
Bye.